and welcome. You're watching our continuing special episodes of Buck Stops here from Ground Zero in the Kashmir Valley, which continues to be a volatile valley. People had hoped that the cycle of violence would break after Independence Day, but Independence Day itself was marked by militant violence in the morning and by civilian deaths in the evening. Over the next 60 minutes, from the ground, from Kashmir to Bangalore, we'll be looking at the entire new sedition debate around the Kashmir Valley, where for the 39th day consecutively, the valley continues to be in lockdown, under curfew, and plagued by a relentless cycle of violence. Let's start with these heartbreaking images of a young commanding officer of the paramilitary forces, Commandant Pramod Kumar, who bid farewell in his hometown, in his home village of Jharkhand, who died fighting from the front in the militant strike in downtown Srinagar. He was only 40 and he was slain. He fell just 1 hour after he unfurled the Indian flag. But even as the paramilitary mourns their own, a hero who was killed, martyred in that militant strike in downtown Srinagar, here on the ground in the Kashmir Valley, this day has been a grim day. It has brought home 6 more civilian deaths in the last 24 hours. Several of those deaths, 4 of them at least, took place in the Budgam district that adjoins Srinagar, an area into which we travelled, an area in which the paramilitary forces say they were compelled to fire at a crowd of protesters that ran into the hundreds. Protesters, they say, attacked them with petrol bombs and stones. The people we met, however, along the way to the area of Magam in Budgam, where these civilian deaths took place, say that there was excessive force used against them. Like we've been asking, who is going to break this cycle of violence? 6 more civilian deaths in the last 24 hours. Now, all of this on the ground in Kashmir, which, as we said, is looking at its 39th day of curfew, unrest, continued violence and lockdown. But far, far, far away in Karnataka, in Bangalore, there is another kind of debate. A conference organized on Jammu and Kashmir and alleged human rights violations by the international NGO Amnesty International is now at the center of a controversy. Amnesty International has been booked for sedition. This after pro-Azadi slogans were raised at the rally. It's the BJP student wing, the ABVP, that has filed the FIR. Some local BJP leaders, including a member of parliament, are demanding the arrest of those who head Amnesty International, who is maintaining that they have done absolutely nothing wrong except to have a conversation around Jammu and Kashmir. Over the next 60 minutes, as we look at the Kashmir sedition debate, perhaps the irony to reflect on is this: do slogans really matter when lives are being lost? Because here in the valley, where we come back again and again to report from Ground Zero, we can tell you this: on both sides of the ideological trenches, on both sides of these pitched battle lines, among the security forces, among the protesters, this is a matter of life and death. And so we have to really ask ourselves, how are we going to resolve Jammu and Kashmir if what we're busy expending our energy on is slogans? Before we get to that debate, let's bring you our report from Ground Zero. The Buck Stops Here team travelled towards Budgam, where the fresh civilian deaths have taken place. Our journey will give you a sense also of how difficult it is to report this story. We were either stopped by protesters who were armed with stones, and on the other hand, we were stopped by security forces who allowed us to go no further. We eventually got pictures out of the village, impacted village, from local residents. But this also tells you how the media too itself has become a target in telling the complete Kashmir story. The tell-all signs of tension are everywhere. Burnt tires, shards of broken glass, used tear gas shells, and roads blocked either by angry protesters or anxious police. As news filters in of fresh civilian deaths in the Budgam district that adjoins Srinagar, Our car inches past men like this one, face hidden by a handkerchief, demanding to know where we are headed. We are told the road ahead may not be absolutely safe for travel. Protesters armed with stones could also stop cars. Angers with section of the more jingoistic national media has made all journalists reporting the Kashmir story vulnerable. At one point, our drivers, local Kashmiris, refused to travel with us any further. They say the situation ahead is too volatile. Suddenly, the till now lifeless curfew-draped road comes alive with angry residents shouting pro-Azadi slogans. As they surround us, we negotiate with two young men to take us ahead on their motorcycles to the village of Ari Pathal, at least 15 kilometers away. As we clamber on, we are advised to lie low and keep our cameras and our faces hidden whenever we can. For the next 10 kilometers, we speed our way past empty streets, curious onlookers, and makeshift barricades of bricks and boulders manned by local villagers. The young men at the wheel of the motorcycle and scooter tell us if someone stops us, we should let them do the talking. As we drive past the idyllic rice fields, their pastoral beauty in ironic contrast to the palpable conflict on the ground, in large stretches we are the only people here. The emptiness is broken occasionally by armoured police vehicles and ambulances. Finally, when we are just 3 kilometers short of the village, we are ordered to halt by the security forces. There are firm orders not to let anyone proceed beyond this point. We have been stopped about 3 kilometers from the interior village of Ari Pathal in Budgam district, the latest flashpoint for violence. The tension in the air is palpable. This after 4 civilian deaths in fresh firing from security forces after clashes between protesters and forces. We're also hearing reports of several other people injured. Now, the difficulty of getting here, the difficulty of telling this story, in a sense, underlines just how volatile the situation is. On both sides of the trenches, people are on edge. And as I said, the tension in the air is palpable. Even getting here was an ordeal. And it underlines, it really does underline and bring home, as we look at now 39 days of continued lockdown and curfew in the Kashmir Valley, how things continue to be very much on the edge. Stung by a militant strike on its men just yesterday, in which the CRPF lost a young commanding officer, Commandant Pramod Kumar, the CRPF argues it was compelled to open fire today after 60 of its soldiers were outflanked by protesters in their hundreds who blocked the deployment of their men.
In between Magam and Birwa, there is a place, Aripanthan. Just nearby that, when the company was crossing that area, the road was blocked by boulders and logs. So all the vehicles stopped. The boys, when they started removing those logs and the boulders, suddenly there was a mob from both the sides and started pelting stones. Initially, what the drivers did, they started reversing the vehicles, but from the back again mob came, approximately say 700 plus from all the sides, and because of this heavy stone pelting, so the boys, they used all the raw drill equipment, like they initially fired the tear gas. They have fired a number of long-range shells as well as short-range. They fired plastic pellets as well, these stun grenades and all. Then, when the whole crowd was almost overpowering them, they used pellet. Few of the boys, they were literally lynched, and the weapons were being snatched, our boys. And the move was very violent. They have hurled petrol bombs also, and at that time means the troops were not left with any other option but to open fire. Initially they fired blank rounds, and that too, the other rounds also in air. It was the aerial firing. But when the mob this violent mob, they started burning the vehicle and lynching, even the company commander being lynched. And they were about to snatch their weapons. Then they had to open fire just to safeguard themselves. 22 of our men, they got injured, 5 of them grievous hurt. And just because of this situation, we are not able to provide them proper medical aid also. We are not able to evacuate them.
The CRPF says they were attacked by petrol bombs as well, and 22 of their men have been injured. They say they have not been able to evacuate the wounded from the area to give them medical relief. But the former Chief Minister of the state, Omar Abdullah, who also happens to be the local MLA of this area, says he's not convinced. He says someone must answer why an area that did not erupt for 39 days of unrest has suddenly done so today.
The first question that naturally springs to mind is why today? Today is the 39th day, 38th or 39th day after Burhan Wani's death. For all of these days, this area has not given you trouble. Something has happened in the last 24 hours that has caused these people to come out and protest in the numbers that they have done. Now, I am willing to accept that there were large crowds, but what triggered that crowd? Now, I'm hearing things from my constituency that I'm not going to repeat here because they're not verified.
What do you suggest?
But I'm suggesting that within the last 24 hours, and particularly yesterday evening, there were developments in that area linked to what happened in Srinagar yesterday that gave rise to the protests today. Now, I'm not getting into specifics because it's not verified. If you can verify it, please go on air with it. But obviously something has happened that has caused these people to come out, because otherwise in the last 38 days, yes, there have been protests in Birwa as there have been protests in other parts of the valley, but they haven't been to the extent where you've had to use force like this. I think it is extremely unfortunate that areas that have been relatively calm are now being dragged into these protests because of our own action.
The National Conference is now mobilizing opposition parties in the state and say they may appeal to President Pranab Mukherjee to intervene. You went on Twitter to basically question what the Prime Minister had said about Baluchistan at the Red Fort, and you said with 6 protesters dead in the last 24 hours, it's clear that we can't even manage our own house in order, so why are we talking about Baluchistan? Why are you linking the two?
Look, because the Government of India is linking it. Government of India has drawn the linkage to POK and Baluchistan. Baluchistan found mention and POK found mention in the all-party meeting that was called to discuss Jammu and Kashmir. Look, the fact is that our own house is on fire. Now, rather than putting the fire out in our house, we're more interested in setting our neighbor's house on fire. Now, how does that make sense to you? It doesn't make sense to me.
As the day ends, the first pictures of the village of Ari Pathal emerge from its local residents. The women in mourning, but through their grief demanding justice for those dead in the firing. Massive protests have broken out again in the area as the men in the village come out in large numbers for the funeral processions. Angry slogans are raised, bringing home the grim reality of the volatile valley and the difficulty of breaking a relentless cycle of violence. In Kashmir, with Manoj Thakur, Manu Nair, Nazir Masoodi and Ruby Dhingra, Barkha Dutt for NDTV. Alright, so from here in Kashmir, when we look at what's happening far away in Bangalore, when we see the controversy around pro-Azadi slogans raised at a seminar organized by Amnesty International, which has now been booked for sedition, we have to ask ourselves, are we really expending energy on the right issue? Instead of debating whether slogans can hurt the idea of India, shouldn't we be transferring that energy to what's happening here, where a relentless cycle of violence is claiming lives every day, as I said, on both sides of the trenches, among security forces? We've seen a militant strike yesterday, and we have seen 6 civilian deaths in the last 24 hours. Instead, we are busy debating sedition. Sedition that was booked, a charge booked against Amnesty International on the watch of a Congress-led government in Karnataka on a complaint filed by the BJP's student wing, the ABVP. How disconnected does this make us from the reality of Jammu and Kashmir? And does this sedition debate and this charge against Amnesty International even matter in the light of the crisis in Kashmir? Let's introduce our panel. Nalin Kohli of the BJP is with us. Abhishek Singhvi of the Congress is with us. Rinda Grover, who is of course a senior advocate in the Supreme Court and a well-known human rights activist herself, is with us. Biraj Patnaik, who is on the board of Amnesty International, the NGO that finds itself at the center of the storm, is with us as well. Sushil Pandit, Kashmiri Pandit in exile, also a commentator, is with us. Vikram Sampat, who's our voice from Bangalore tonight, a well-known author and commentator himself, is also with us. And finally, Shehla Rashid, a Kashmiri herself, and also a JNU student leader who knows a thing or two about how slogans can get you into trouble. But my question is, Nalin Kohli, how do these slogans matter? I'm sitting in Srinagar, and I can tell you, just to complete my question, that if you want to file sedition charges against everybody who shouts Azadi, you'll have to lock up half the Kashmir Valley today.
Well, there's a presumption if you were there, you might have probably had a better detail. I was not there, you were not there, others are not there. There's an FIR. On that FIR, it's a first information report as anything. It's not the gospel truth. It'll lead to some kind of charge sheet if there is any fact to it. If there is a charge sheet, it has to be backed by evidence. So, I think there's a presumption that the minute it comes in that everything is wrong. Now, you raised two important questions. Now, why are we expending so much energy? And the second you said about how disconnected it can be. Perhaps you are trying to connect them.
Yeah.
You're trying to connect it, so therefore you are finding it disconnected. A lot of things happen in the world we are sitting in. They all need not be necessarily connected in the manner that we would like to see it. And the second part to it is, in terms of how are we seeing, why are we not putting energy to finding solutions? There's a presumption that nothing is being done and nobody wants to do anything. Certainly, you need to understand that the problem anywhere, and a problem as complicated as Jammu and Kashmir, and the Kashmir Valley, what we are seeing now, is not a problem that started yesterday morning and it didn't start out of a function that Amnesty wanted to do. It's a problem that has a historical legacy. It's not been solved. People are looking at it. Various solutions are there. Nobody wants it to continue in this manner. The all-party meet, everyone is expressing their concern. Everyone is concerned and everyone wants something to become better there. So when we try to connect these dots, perhaps you may believe that no, these are not the solutions. I don't look at it like that.
But Nalin, briefly before I go to Abhishek, the reason I connect it is because this was a rally on Jammu and Kashmir, I beg your pardon, a seminar on Jammu and Kashmir. It was talking in the context of human rights violations, and then pro-Azadi slogans are raised, for which Amnesty International finds itself booked for sedition. I am saying to you today that there's much more than sloganeering in terms of separatist sentiment on the ground. It needs politics. It needs politics and a political solution, not India debating over slogans and sedition.
Well, Barkha, we could take the debate another way. I could quote the Economist. Amnesty also at one point was associated with the Cage with some organization called Cage, which considered Jihadi John, who just I believe has been killed a few months ago, as a lamb, as a very elegant version of this. So it's okay. Amnesty as an organization, whether they do something right, wrong, they've done some good work. Maybe all of it cannot be considered to be the best. Geeta Saigal episode is there. Now they officially say we don't want to, we perhaps won't sign a petition with Cage. So there are different facets to everything. I think the minute you start putting them all in the cauldron and try to find one answer, confusion comes. With regard to sloganeering and Azadi and sedition, the law is specific on it. The Supreme Court is on it. The legal aspects will be put up in the courts of law if they go to the courts of law and what happens in the courts of law. But in India, as far as the freedom of expression of speech is there are, let me finish, then I'm sure you may have something to say. Where as far as freedom of expression and speech is there are reasonable restrictions. So the Supreme Court hasn't held sedition unconstitutional so far.
No, you know what, it's not that simple.
Okay, now I just... Shehla, just half a second. Shehla, just half a second. I just wanted to say legally we know that the Supreme Court actually says that that words in themselves are not seditious. There actually has to be an incitement to violence. But I'm just saying, Nalin says you can't connect the ground situation in Kashmir with this fuss over amnesty in Bangalore. I just want to get Abhishek Singhvi on that. Even as PTI is reporting that the Home Ministry is now probing or announced a probe against Amnesty International for possible FCRA violations. But Abhishek, this happened in a Congress-led government, so you really can't complain about the BJP.
Look, chest thumping, pressure tactics, registering an FIR, the law will take its own course. That's something which we don't have to really interfere with. If there is something, they will look into it. But I am very concerned, Barkha, there are 3 or 4 issues which have been completely missed out. First and foremost, I think it's very important to realize what a cherished ideal free speech is. Secondly, nobody seems to understand what sedition is. Something which is punishable by life imprisonment. You can't have a knee-jerk reaction, trigger happy on subjectivity. Judgment after judgment of the Supreme Court from 1962 onwards, Kedarnath Singh, 1985 Balwant Singh, 1997 Bilal Kalu.
Your government.
They have held that there must be an overt act. No, they have registered FIR. FIR registration is nothing. It may not be converted into a charge sheet at all. It may be dropped. It's only a first information report. They have to investigate it. Let's go to the substance, Barkha. Let's not talk politics. It's an FIR. Just consider. You have rightly said, I've got the judgments here. Overt acts where there is a clear likelihood of public disorder or incitement. And one more minute, very striking, Barkha. Let me read to you the words of Kedarnath Singh, 62. The words used then, which were held not to be seditious, are: today the dogs of the CID are loitering around Barauni. Many official dogs are sitting even in this meeting. Today these Congress gundas are sitting on the gaddi due to the mistake of the people. These official dogs will also be liquidated along with these Congress gundas. Number 2, in Balwant Singh, Khalistan Zindabad, Raj Karega Khalsa, Hinduon pe Punjab chhod karke jayenge, etc. All this sedition rejected. In Bilal Kalu, a Muslim militant outfit, making very strong speeches but with no incitement to violence, held not sedition. We tend to forget that we actually a much better way of embarrassing them. They would be embarrassed straight away there in the seminar. People raising Azadi slogans, who is going to look at them there? They can be deeply embarrassed. But don't make them martyrs out of these chest-thumping complaints by a few misguided youth, be they belong to the RSS or to the BHP or to the Bajrang Dal.
Let me just get Nalin to come in briefly there.
You know, Barkha, I have to say.
Let me get Nalin briefly.
Yeah, very briefly.
Nalin, do you agree with the ABVP complaint or not?
Who am I to agree?
BJP representative.
Hold on, I'm not their advocate. I'm not their advocate in this country. As much as free speech and constitutional rights as I have, you have, Dr. Singhvi has, or the ABVP, each one is entitled to exercise their constitutional rights. So it's okay. So the point I want to finish here is two. One is Dr. Singhvi has elegantly told us about the law on sedition, but I mean I find it a little amusing that as if it's almost being pointed as if we are responsible for it. As you rightly pointed out, the police there of a Congress government felt that there may be a matter there that they wanted to. It's an FIR. Let's see what happens. This is not a debate on sedition. Anyone who goes ahead and does something which is not in conformity with the law, and it will be upheld by the court. Are we believing that our courts don't adjudicate correctly?
Barkha, I wanted to say something.
One sentence. It is also extremely doubtful. Barkha, it is extremely doubtful whether you can have a blanket charge of sedition against an organization or institution at all.
No, that's
I can understand that you as a member of organization X or me as a member of organization Y may have transgressed some boundary.
I need to move on.
But a whole institution, amnesty by itself can't be seditious. A whole organization.
Okay, now amnesty is under probe. Okay, Shaila, go ahead.
I must congratulate Nalinji for the remarkable simplification of the whole issue. But the bad news is that this is not that simple. The issue is not who is saying what or who is uttering what. The issue is, you know, what is the identity of the person who is uttering that. First of all, I mean, if I quote a few examples, just give me the liberty. Narendra Modi himself said that Baniya jo hai, wo soldier se zyada risk leta hai. And had it been someone else saying this, had it been ABCD person saying this from a left party, say a Dalit, say a Muslim, they would have been booked for sedition by now. ABVP itself, they called on Independence Day in JNU, they called the singer Abhijit, who has been on record, you know, on record he has said, "Arey kahan ka independence sala? ये तो घटिया country है, ये तो third class country है," इस type के comments जो हैं. And then he makes a mockery of it and says, "मेरा भारत, अच्छा चलो ठीक है, महान है, ha ha ha." He goes on. And this is a person who ABVP called to JNU on Independence Day. Now here is the hypocrisy, that this is not a simple legal affair. This is being used as a chilling, to create a chilling effect. What ABVP and other allied organizations, RSS, BJP, etc., what they are trying to do is they are trying to sanitize the Indian mainland of any discussion on Kashmir. I mean, what is happening in Kashmir right now, it should force everyone to get up and take notice. And on the contrary, what we are trying to do is sanitize the whole country of any discussion on Kashmir. Now, this is not isolated.
So you do see So you do see it linked, Shaila. Shaila, you see it linked. You see it as linked. You see it as linked.
Yes, of course it is. And ABVP uses pressure tactics to file an FIR. I mean, every other day ISA activists are beaten up in, today, even, you know, today ABVP activists, they have beaten up people who were on hunger strike in the law faculty against seat cut in law faculty. We could not get an FIR registered. The other day, some weeks back, they beat up a guy so much he had to...
Okay, one minute. Nalin, I know you want to come in there. I know everyone wants to come in. Okay, Shaila, let me get it. Vrinda, Sushil, Pandit and the others. One second, everybody hang on, guys.
Just 2 comments.
Okay, now...
Very briefly.
Okay, Nalin, 1 comment, then Vrinda, I do
just
have
one sentence each. And, you know, I mean, I do understand that the ABVP is not a democratic organization that promotes Naxalism or anything that the left or the ultra-left or the extreme left would like to. So our standards of what we call democracy are slightly different. And just a sentence out of the Economist article which said that another former senior Amnesty figure a few years ago had said that CAGES, which is CAGE is an organization that promoted jihadi John, promotion of defensive